everybody. Hope you're having a lovely day. As they say, hip hip hooray. And for this Brewing Lads, we're actually going to talk about my personal top 10 cards from the upcoming Universe Beyond Magic the Gathering Avatar The Last Airbender set. Personally, this set looks awesome. There's a lot of heart was put into this set. Like, I was able to watch the whole show before the preview season, and it was actually fun rewatching Avatar again. There's actually a lot of heart put into that show. And as well as much, there's a lot of heart put into this set. Like, there's a lot of good callbacks, even to the memes, even to the stuff that people adore from the original show run. But also, as stated before, even if you're not an Avatar fan, I'd still say you have to keep an eye on this set, because there's a lot of very powerful cards in this set. And we are going to be talking about a top 10. Now for this, we're actually going to talk about both the top 10 cards from the main set, as well as the top 10 cards from the upcoming Jumpstart product, because the Jumpstart product actually does also have a lot of good, powerful cards in it as well. I will say that I am not including the scene kits in this top 10, even though there are some really good scene kit cards. I would still say keep an eye on the scene kit cards. There are actually some pretty good, like, fun brew rounds, as well as just some good tech cards for deck designs in general. But for this top 10, we are going to stick to the main set, as well as the Jumpstart set. So nevertheless, let's get started with our top 10, shall we? Nevertheless, we're going to start with our number 10 main card, which honestly is... Let's make sure. Badoo! Foggy Swamp Visions. Now, this is a 1 black sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you waterbend Ets, which for those who don't know, waterbending, essentially what you do is you can spend Ets into the mana cost. It's like a Convoke ability where you can either use mana, or you can even tap down your own creatures and artifacts, which is very important here, to essentially activate the waterbend ability, which in this case, the waterbend Ets will allow you to exile Ets target creature cards from graveyards. Note, that's including your graveyard as well as your opponent's graveyard. And then for each creature card exiled this way, you create a token that's a copy of it. At the beginning of the next end step, you sacrifice those tokens. Now, there is going to be some downsides to this card. Like, yes, the tokens don't have haste, though, let's be frank, there's a lot of haste enablers in multiple formats to get around that cost. But most importantly, I think this is just probably one of the more better, solid combo reanimator cards that we got in quite a minute. And that's saying something, considering that with the Spider-Man set, we had, like, Superior Spider-Man and such. So, the reason why this card is very good is mostly just because it's very cheap. Like, yes, waterbending Ets does look costly, but as I stated before, you can tap down creatures as well as artifacts to pay for the waterbend costs, which honestly, for, like, basically any control-based deck design, or even decks that even play, like, control-based artifacts, which we have a ton of stuff. Like, we have artifacts that do edict effects, we have artifacts that just essentially give you card draw, we have a lot of even ones that give you just semi-removal in general. Just being able to tap those artifacts down to activate this effect. I mean, heck, we even have artifacts that allow you to mill to help fuel the Foggy Swamp Vision. So being able to tap those artifacts down to get this effect, very powerful. And as stated before, waterbending is just really easy to set up. But also, there are just, even though our tokens don't have haste, there's still plenty of powerful into the battlefield effects, even if the token is temporary, that can still just lead the game wins in general. Like, I've seen decks that were able to reanimate multiple Craterhoof Behemoths to essentially win the game, which is pretty easy. And as stated before, this can target multiple graveyards, including your opponent, so this could be even good tech against your opponent's graveyard shenanigans if you see them doing that. Just target your opponent's Arden, and hey, you get your own Arden temporary for a turn and make a temporary demon token, which is very nice. So, my number 10 card in the main set, Foggy Swamp Visions, very good card. Now, my number 10 card in the Jumpstart set is the Tectonic Split, which is going to probably split some people. Now, nevertheless, this is a 6-mana enchantment. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice half the lands you control, rounded up. And it also has hexproof. And lands you control have add-free mana of any one color. Now, I will say, this is a card that gives people probably bootlegger stash vibes, and people kind of overhype that card to the navy to blue, even though more or less it's more of a fine card that specifically in niche brews is pretty powerful. Like, I liked it in Gimbal when I played it for a little bit and such. But for Tectonic Split, with the cost, sacrificing half your lands is actually not that costly in the potential ramp you can get. But even in a majority of deck designs, sacrificing lands is actually more of an upside than a downside. Think stuff like Titania, Lord Windgrace, Hallfroll, etc. pretty much there are ways to make it where sacrificing half your lands, it's more going to be potential synergy. I mean, imagine doing this with a bunch of lands on the battlefield and you have like a Mayhem Devil on the battlefield. That is a lot of pings, very quick. Also, there are ways to just bypass the cost for a variety of ways, whether you tutor for the enchantment, or even stuff like essentially being able to play lands from your graveyard with a Crucible Worlds effect, or Splendid Reclamation effects. This one's pretty nice, simple, to the point. Tectonic Split helps you give you significant lamp, and the cost, quote-unquote cost, is actually more on an upside for very specific deck designs that want this effect. Nevertheless, let's now get to the number 9 entries, shall we? So, on number 9 in the main set is, actually we're going to talk about lessons. We're going to do some learning here, y'all. And that is Accumulate Wisdom. 1 in a blue for an instant lesson. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of those cards into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. So it's an anticipate effect. But, most importantly, if you put each of those cards into your hand instead, if there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard. So, one thing I learned by playing through the streamer event and the early access, the lesson spells and packages that we're getting in Avatar is actually really, really solid. Like, there's some really good lessons in general. Like, we have literally, like, a Rampant Growth as a lesson, which is kind of nuts. There's even just some solid removal that it's lessons. There's even just some solid, like, value generation spells and lessons in general. And having Accumulate Wisdom as a payoff is just very good. Because at worst, it's an Anticipate, and Anticipate is a perfectly fine Magic card. But at its best, it's a 2-mana Ancestral Recall. You know, Ancestral Recall, a spell that's banned in multiple formats and is restricted in Vintage. Yeah, I think this is going to be a very popular card if the Lesson deck exists, which honestly, I think it will exist. There's a lot of good, like, cards in general in the lesson package, as well as just good, pretty much like synergy cards, like stuff like Grand, which, by the way, if there was a card that I slept on in this set, is Grand is really good in the lesson decks, because if you meet the free lesson requirement in the graveyard, this then becomes literally Ancestral Recall for being 1 mana, which is absurd. So yeah, Accumulate Wisdom, just a generally good card resource generation spell that will be very beneficial due to the fact that we're getting a lot of good lessons. And even this is just going to be really good in older formats where you can either tutor it with Learn or even have the more powerful lesson cards in general. I think the lesson deck is a legit going to be a thing, and that's because Accumulate Wisdom is just going to be a very good card draw resource engine for that deck archetype. Nevertheless, let's get to the number 9 on the Jumpstart set, which is Monkiatsu. 3 and a white for a legendary creature, Human Monk. It's a free, and whenever another creature you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, you may Airbend that creature. Now, this is the first time we talk about Airbend. Airbend is essentially an ability where you can target a non-land permanent with the effect, and then what happens is you exile it, and then while it's exiled, the owner may cast it for 2 generic mana rather than its mana cost. Now, to be honest, Airbending is pretty easy to get discounted to do semi-infinite shenanigans. Like, if we're going to talk about this, now note this is a commander card, so it's not legal in Standard. But for example, Airbending in Standard, you can actually make Airbending 0 with using stuff like Doc Orok from Outlaws of Under Junction. But also in Commander, there's just so many ways to discount your Airbending spells, like with, you know, Herb's Incubator if you're in a Kindred deck, Semblance Anvil. There's a lot of ways to make it where the Airbending cost is either significantly discounted or just 0 mana. And with that being the case, what would look like just be kind of like a good semi-protection creature in general is actually a ridiculously powerful combo enabler, because there's a lot of powerful creatures that can target multiple creatures and the creature itself to enable the infinite combos. We're talking like essentially stuff like you enter the battlefield, you tap down a target creature or untap a target creature. Like, the best example would probably be in the Spider-Man set, kind of like the Flash Thompson card, essentially. Think of stuff like that, and even in Mono White, there's a lot of payoffs. Like, you can do, like, maybe life gain shenanigans to get the infinite ETBs and such to just infinitely life gain. When with Veldar Sovereign, there's a lot of ways to brew around Monkiatsu, and I do think this is actually a really good card. And at its worst, it's just a solid protection spell in general for your creatures and such to just get them airbend and then just cast them later. But I do think this is just a ridiculously fun combo enabler, kind of like Commander deck design, honestly. So now we get to the number 8 cards, and the number 8 we're going to talk about, for standard, it's Planetarium of Jumpstart. This is from the main set. 6 mana for a legendary artifact. You can tap it for 1 mana, and tapping it to scry 2. Whenever you scry or surveil, look at the top card of your library. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Do this only 1 each turn. Honestly, this is just a ridiculously powerful card. Anytime you get mana discount by being able to cast a spell for free is absolutely absurd. Also, this is just very easy to trigger, and there are multiple ways to scry and surveil in standard. Like, I think, like, during the streamer event, a lot of people were playing, like, Maze Mind Tome. There's even lands that do it. Like, we have the whole Temple cycle still in standard, Eggs of Foundations. We have the Surveil lands from Murders of Karloff Mana. And even just some general lands that just scry and surveil by itself that are just, like, usually draft chaff that actually might not be draft chaff with this card, because it's like, oh, when I play that land, I get the free Ugin. Also, it being 6 mana is costly, but ramping to it is not going to be that hard with the current control package, as well as just the current ramp package we're having in standard, as well as coming into standard with Avatar. So getting to Planetarium Jumpstart is not going to be hard, as well as there's just ridiculously plenty of powerful payoffs in standard, as well as modern if you play this in Tron, whereas like there's stuff like Ugin, Eldrazi's, really any ridiculously big, powerful, high-end, powerful late-game spell can be easily cheated out with Planetarium Jumpstart, and you can easily make it where you get multiple spells during your turn and your opponent's turn with a variety of ways to be able to scry and surveil. Like, we could have a whole ton of cards that do that at instant speed. So yeah, number 8, it's Planetarium of Jumpstart. Very absurd, powerful card. You're going to be surprised how much mana cheat that people are going to use with this card. Which actually, that's going to be kind of a theme with this top 10, but we'll get to that later down the line. So number 8 in the Jumpstart set, we got to talk about, okay, I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize, Hebe, Forest Guardian. If I butcher that name, I am so sorry. Hebe, or is it Hebe?
Hebe Spirit.
I am ridiculously sorry. Nevertheless, it's a legendary creature, Bear Spirit. When this creature enters, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a shrine card. You may put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle, and then you have Rulebook and tapping it. For each legendary enchantment you control, you create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token with. This token can't be blocked or blocked by non-spirit creatures. Simply put, this is going to be the Shrine Commander that doesn't automatically make you the threat. Everybody had win against the 5-color Shrine deck previously, which was the one that we got from Neon Dynasty, Oh, I am legit forgetting the name off the top of my brain, but you know the one I'm talking about, the one where when you play enchantments, you make Shrine tokens. Ridiculously absurd. That one was an automatically, like, very powerful commander that people got really annoyed at really quick. This is a more balanced version of the 5-color Shrine Commander that will not automatically make you the target, I will say. But also, it can even just be a cheeky card to play in some 99s and some deck designs, because it can cheat out specific shrines in some deck designs. Like, if you're only needing, like, 1 or 2 free shrines for, like, a combo, you can use this creature to essentially help tutor out pieces for the combo. And the activated ability itself is pretty strong, because there's a lot of powerful legendary enchantments, and making those specific tokens can be pretty good to help essentially get in for damage if you are not going against anyone playing spirits. But also there are ways to cheekily, like, you know, stuff like Moonlit Meditation, where if you target another powerful creature, then those spirit tokens can become something else. You get what I'm saying here? So yeah, the Forest Guardian is my number 8 Jumpstart card of the set, without a sweat. Now we get to number 7. Bada-ba-bada-boo. What is number 7 on the list? Let's see. Number 7 is Firebending Student. 1 in a red for a creature human monk. Prowess, it has Firebending Etz, where Etz is this creature's power. Whenever this creature attacks, add Etz red. This mana lasts until the end of combat. That's how Firebending works, so it's essentially mana you generate during combat. And I'm just going to say this right off the bat. This is probably one of the most absurd Firebending cards in the set. Scalable Firebending should not be underestimated, especially this cheap and being able to scale up thanks to the Prowess ability. This also, it's easy to generate a ton of mana with all the combat tricks like the giant growths in the world that we have in Standard and such to just buff up this creature significantly to generate a ton of Firebending mana. And we have already seen a ton of good payoff cards for the Explosion mana during combat. We have seen stuff like Faded Firepower, the Great Train Heist, even just a ridiculously big X Burn Spell can be good. And at its worst, I still think this is going to be a great card for Mono Red, because at its worst, you can just use the mana you generate with this to just like, with the activated abilities that some Mono Red decks have. Like, for example, Hired Claw, to be able to buff it, stuff like that in general. So yeah, nevertheless, my number 7 main set card, Firebending Student, this is going to cause an explosion of mana, as well as just a lot of explosive payoffs with that Firebending mana in general. Very scary 2-drop, in my opinion. Now, number 7th in the Jumpstart set, that has to be Overwhelming Victory. Speaking of a payoff for all the red mana, this is a 5-mana instant lesson. It deals 5 damage to a target creature. Each creature you control gains trample and gets X plus 0 until end of turn, where X is the amount of excess damage dealt this way. Simply put, this is what I like to call the burn spell Craterhoof Behemoth. It is pretty much easy to be able to use this as a semi-combat trick to remove like a smallish creature and give your team a big boost to go for a finish, or just a significant amount of damage. But even then, it still can even be used to just remove like a good mid-range creature. Like, even if you dealt like a 4 toughness creature and just get everything a +1 boost, for some go-wide decks, that's just going to be enough, but there is still some circumstances where you can make your opponent like generate a 1/1 mirror token, and then you just play Overwhelming Victory, deal 4 damage, and then just be able to buff. Not to mention, there's stuff like damage modifiers like Faded Firepower, where you can make this damage doubled or additional damage to then get additional buffs. So yeah, number 7 in the Jumpstart set, Overwhelming Victory. I think you're going to see this card quite a lot in Spell Sling or go-wide decks in general, honestly. And pretty much any decks that can copy the spell without a sweat. Now let's get to the number 6 on the list. And number 6, personally for me, it is, for the main set, is Ain Swift Savior. 1 white and a blue for a legendary creature human avatar ally. It's a 2/3 with flash and fly, and flash meaning that you can cast it at instant speed, aka anytime. And then when Ain enters, you can airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell. And then it also has an ability to waterbend 8 to transform him into ATLA, Ocean's Fury, legendary creature avatar spirit ally. It's a 5/5, reach and trample. Whenever ATLA attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature you control. Simply put, this is a very versatile mid-range tempo creature. The factor that you can both use it like aggressively to just essentially remove an opponent's creature so you can attack in with your other creatures to essentially take out a chunky blocker is very nice. Even use it as a semi-control spell to essentially airbend maybe a targeted removal spell or even an upcoming board wipe is very powerful. The fact that they can target any spell in the mid, early, and late game with this is just absolutely absurd. So this is not really a dead card any time in the game. For the most part. Like, there are some times where you're going to play this on turn 6, your opponent plays a 4-mana board wipe, and then you airbend it, and your opponent's like, okay, I'm going to spend 2 mana, the rest of my mana, to do the board wipe still. There are going to be circumstances like that, but still, being able to have that type of control counter is very nice. As well as just being able to be a semi-protection spell to just maybe you want to airbend your own creatures because maybe you want to repeat an ETB, stuff like that. Like, it is a very versatile card on the front side. And we haven't even talked about the fact that you can just transform it into Ain and Law later in the game and just make it a solid late game threat and payoff. Like, when you do the waterbending and tap down your creatures to transform it, they're all going to automatically get the buff when you attack in with Ain and Law, so very absurd late game threat and payoff. And then the cutest thing you can do with this is you can actually throw this into Agha's Soul Cauldron to transform other creatures and such with the waterbend ability. Like Avatar Ain, the main kind of like highlight card of the set where people are trying to figure out how to get to the backside without using Moon Mist. If you want to find a way to do it in Standard, have Ain Swift Savior go to the graveyard, throw it into Agha's Soul Cauldron, give Avatar Ain the Cauldron counter, bada bing bada boom, you flip it onto the backside without having to do all the waterbending shenanigans. Though, in my defense, I still think doing, with Avatar Ain specifically, even flipping it using the bending method of activating all the bender abilities, still is a relatively strong effect since you get all that card draw, but that's another story for another time. Nevertheless, my number 6 main set card, Ain Swift Savior. Now let's actually get to the Jumpstart number 6 card, which in this case is Jet, Rebel Leader. It is a 3/4 legendary creature human rebel ally. It has whenever Jet attacks, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. and then you put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. Simply put, this is a mono-white Winota. Kind of. Also, this is kind of funny in Winota decks in general. But still, digging 5 cards should net you creatures most of the time in a good, like, mid-range to aggro-based deck design. And even what's cute is you can actually collect a company. Oh, no, wait, you can't collect a company this. For some reason, I thought this was just 2 in white. Never mind. I'm going to have to edit this. Editor, do your fun little editing where you cross out that it can be collect a company. It cannot. I made a brain fart there. You can tell there was some last-minute edits with this, because I wanted to try to get this out as soon as possible in this PowerPoint presentation. But it does look like kind of like a semi-collector company, where cheating out any good, powerful creatures from 1 to 3 mana using the attack trigger is a very strong effect. Still, I do like Jet Rebuild Leader, and we have a little bit of error there. Cannot be collector company. My bad. That was a brain fart. But still, just a very good, strong commander, and even good card in the 99 and some aggro-based deck designs in general. Now we're going to get to my number 5 card of the set, for the main set, which is Momo Friendly Flyer. 1 mana for a 1/1 Lemur Bat ally. It has flying. And the first non-Lemur creature spell with flying you cast during each of your turn costs 1 less to cast. And whenever another creature you control with flying enters, Momo gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I basically just call this the flying aggressive Llanowar Elf because this is like a perfect turn 1 play, and the amount of mana discount that you can get with this card is absolutely absurd. There's a lot of powerful turn 2 plays that are available when you play this card on turn 1. Like, for example, Quantum Witterer is a very popular standard card. You can warp it in for 1 mana on turn 2 using Momo, and then you can Splash Portal to flicker it so you can have a turn 2 4/5 that draws you 2 cards on turn 2. Now, granted, this is a really hard thing to trigger with the current mana base and standard, but Lorwyn is coming out next year, and we're going to have access to proper shocklands to make this a lot more easier. So, something to keep in mind is all I'm saying. But even then, there's still just a lot of powerful free drop flying creatures that casting them on turn 2 is actually pretty absurd. Like, we talked about Avatar Swift Savior, but even for the bat decks in general, which this is a bat, a turn 2 Zoroline seems pretty good in my opinion. Like, I think Alchemy Bats is going to be legitimately buffed thanks to Momo, since there's a lot of good bats in Alchemy that essentially can get discounted with Momo. And also just the fact that you net the mana discount and still can attack in with it, with the buff that it gets, makes this an absolutely absurd 1-drop. This is a card that if you see it, you just need to remove it immediately, because if you don't, it is going to hurt you very, very quick with the mana cheat, as well as just the aggressiveness of Momo being buffed when you get multiple flyers on the battlefield. This card is scary as heck. Nevertheless, let's talk about our number 5 Jumpstart card, which in this case, I'm going to go with kind of the meme here with the Bison Whistle, 1 in the green for an artifact. You tap it for 1 mana, you look at the top card of your library. If it's a Bison card, you may put it onto the battlefield. If it's a creature card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. So, honestly, this is just a fun alternate take on Didgeridoo, which for those who don't know, it's a very old artifact from a very early Magic set, where it essentially allowed you to cheat out Minotaurs. Now, this one, the cheekier touch is you're cheating out Bison with this. You know, cheating out stuff like Appa and stuff. However, this is not a hard card to break because it's easy to break this with Arcane Adaptation, Maskwood Nexus. We even have a legendary, essentially, we have the Leyline of Change or something like that. Essentially a Leyline that allows us to get the ability to Arcane Adaptation ability on turn 1. We can just name Bison and such in like internal formats, or even just if we want to do it in Commander. There's a lot of ways to break this, and the thing that's most important about this card, this is instant speed. So you can use this as kind of like a combat trick to cheat in. Like, let's say if you have an Arcane Adaptation, you name Bison, you can cheat out like Eldrazi at combat speed. That's kind of absurd. Or during your opponent's at their end step, before your turn, you could be like, okay, I'm going to activate Bison Whistle and cheap out, say, like an Emrakul. Or Drakaseth. Like, there's a lot of absurd stuff. Like, I'm even considering this for my Changeling deck, because cheating out, like, my Changelings with this is kind of funny. But even then, it's still just a card that can be just a good card draw card or a mill card in general to throw cards in the graveyard if you want to. So I really like Bison Whistle a lot, and that's why it's my number 5 Jumpstart card of the set. Now we get to the number 4 card for the main set, which honestly, I want to put the whole Ascension Cycle here because the Ascension Cycle in this set, we got an Ascension for each bending in the set. We got a Airbender Ascension, Waterbender Ascension, Firebender Ascension, and Earthbender Ascension. I'd say that whole cycle is just legit gas, but if we had to put one card on the list, I went with Firebender Ascension, one in the red for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, you create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. But most importantly, whenever a creature you control attacking causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger, put a quest counter on this enchantment. Then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, you may copy the ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is, for me personally, one of the easier cards to fulfill the quest requirement in the Ascension cycle. Maybe Airbender Ascension, kind of a close second, with also Earthbender Ascension also being easy to trigger as well. But this one's very easy because you can just set up your board state with a bunch of creatures with good attack triggers in general, and then play your Firebender Ascension to just get the quest counters done with like a full combat cycle. And also, attack triggers are just powerful things to duplicate in general. Like, there's just some that can, like, for example, Firebending in the main set, where getting double Firebender mana is absurd. There's also stuff like Annabelle, where you can deal damage. There's even, like, the Mobilize trigger from Dragonstorm, where you get multiple Mobilize triggers, which can be absurd. And even getting the Firebending token is a nice plus with the additional value here to help trigger the Firebender Ascension. You kind of see that with the whole cycle that gave you cards that essentially can help you more or less fulfill the quest requirement. But still, I would say the whole Ascension cycle is technically my number 4, but if we had to go with one in the cycle, it has to be Firebender Ascension. Very easy to get this, you get a nice token, and doubling attack triggers this cheap is nothing to sleep on. So now my number 4 Jumpstart card, it has to be Chakra Meditation. 2 and a blue for an enchantment. When this enchantment enters, you return up to 1 target instant sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card and discard a card unless there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard. Simply put, this is just an easy card draw loot engine that comes with a regrowth effect, which is nice to have as the ETB. But also, as I stated before, especially in Commander and Eternal formats, it's going to be pretty easy to fulfill the lesson requirement for this, to make this just a solid card draw engine. And the best part is technically the fact that it does initially loot. The loot engine actually helps fuel the inevitability to meet the free lesson requirement to get the card draw engine on this. So simply put, it's just a nice card draw engine with a good regrowth effect. Nice, simple, to the point, very good card. Now we get to my number 3 card for the main set, which, well, we gotta talk about it inevitably. We gotta talk about probably one of the most hyped cards of the set, which is One Chiton Librarian. It's in a blue for a legendary creature blue spirit with flash. It's a 1/1, flying vigilance. And then when it enters, you put Et's +1/+1 counters on him, then draw half Et's cards, rounded down. But most importantly, whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and draw a card. I personally find this card going to be pretty fun in the Bird Kindred deck in Standard, since we have stuff like Traveling Chocobo to double that ETB, which is kind of amusing, I'm not going to lie. However, the reason why this is the most hyped card of the set is because it is just a potentially powerful CEDH card with that card draw trigger. Simply put, there's a lot of ways that opponents search their library in that format with tutors as well as just land destruction effects. By the way, the fact that this can trigger with land destruction in Standard with all the Field of Ruin effects that allow your opponent to search for a basic or a land, ridiculously absurd. Like, during the streamer event, I had someone that played all the land destruction effects that allowed me to tutor for basics and such, and had one Chiton on the battlefield to essentially get extra card draw. It was disgusting. Absolutely amazing. But yeah, this is going to be an EDH staple card, mostly because this type of effect where getting additional resources from your opponent tutoring is very strong. Mostly going to be morally a good CEDH card. However, there is the benefit of just the fact that it's just a good mana payoff spell later in the game to essentially make a really big bird at instant speed and draw you some cards. It's very powerful. It is one of the most sought after cards of the set for obvious reasons. Just very good. Now, my number 3 card for the Jumpstart set has to be Avatar Roku, the Firebender. 3 red, red, red for a legendary creature human avatar. Sit. Whenever a player attacks, that's either you or your opponent, add 6 red mana. Until end of combat, you don't lose that mana as steps in. And then red, 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 target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. Honestly, this is just a really powerful multi-turn attack trigger. Like, the fact that this triggers both during your turn when you attack and when your opponent's turn attack. Having 6 red mana in general to be used for either mana sinks, like with permanents on the battlefield, or even just for general instant speed spells, ridiculously absurd. Like, there's even cards like, essentially, Omnath, like the 5-color Phyrexian Omnath, where essentially if you get the 6 red mana, you can essentially just filter it in with Omnath for later. There's a lot of ways to use that mana and such during your opponent's turn. Even at worst, you can just use it for the activated ability that Roku has that can be used for fun kind of like combat shenanigans, make your opponent's creature very, very buff to get more damage into your opponent. Which, by the way, to force your opponents to attack, obviously you're going to use Go Defense. That will be the most beneficial thing to do with this card. But also, as general, this is just going to be a fun Commander Brew round, but I could also see this being a good card in the 99 for most Goad-based deck designs in general. Just a very powerful card. 6 red mana during every turn. If you can be efficient with that mana, this is going to be shown to be a pretty powerful card in my opinion. Now we get to the number 2 card in the main set, which is, I still think, one of the strongest enchantments in the set. It's Obsessive Pursuit, 1 and a black for an enchantment. When his enchantment enters, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a clue token. Which, for those who don't know, a clue token is a artifact token that allows you to spend 2 mana and tap it, to sacrifice it, to draw a card. Which is going to be important because whenever you attack, you put X +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target attacking creature, where X is the number of permanents you sacrifice this turn. If X is 3 or greater, that creature also gains lifelink until end of turn. Simply put, this is just going to be a consistent card draw and token generation engine in general. Like, imagine if you had additional token modifiers, like in Commander with this card, like stuff with Academy Manufacturer, stuff like that in general. But even then, in Standard, this is just going to be very good. Just being able to get a consistent clue token generation is going to be very powerful, especially with cards that synergize with, essentially with an artifact entering the battlefield. You know, stuff like Peener's stuff in general. But even there's stuff like, essentially, just in control decks in general, I think we'll just want this, because that's just going to be a consistent card draw engine that they can activate at instant speed. But most importantly, this is just going to be a very good deck in sack decks in general, because it's going to be easy to sacrifice multiple things in general in those deck designs to get the buff trigger, to then also get the life gain trigger to gain the life back that you're going to lose with this effect. There's just a lot of ways to sacrifice permanents in Standard in general. Like, there's a ton. Like, there's that snake from Bloomburrow that makes you sacrifice its permanents to discount it. There's just, even with Firebending mana in general, to use and sacrifice the clue tokens you're going to generate. There's even some circumstances where you just play this on turn 2, you're just going to get a couple of clue tokens, you don't mind losing a life. And then when you attack with like a big Firebender, you then can just automatically draw the card before the full attack trigger resolves on this, and then just get the big buff to then get the life gain to get the life gain back from the life you lost with Obsessive Pursuit. This is just a very powerful 2-mana draw engine enchantment. I think it's going to be a very popular card for control decks and sacrifice decks in general. It's just really, really good. And then my number 2 jumpstart card of the set. We have to talk about Toph, the Earthbending Master. Though I will say this whole cycle of experience matter cards that are coming from the jumpstart set are cards you want to keep an eye on. All of them are relatively easy to get the experience trigger, but this is probably the best of the bunch personally. Because simply put, Landfall to get an experience counter is a absolutely busted ability. Ridiculously absurd. Like, Landfall, there are multiple ways to play multiple lands to get those experience counters, and then that would get you multiple experiences counters, which then, just being able to do that with many commanders that interact with experience counters in general are going to love this card that can play it. And also, as we're going to talk about, I think one of the most powerful bending mechanics in the set is Earthbending. It's just a really strong effect. For those who don't know what Earthbending is essentially you target a land, you make it into a creature, you put X counters on it, depending on Earthbend X, and then essentially if the land ever gets destroyed or exiled, you can just put it back on the battlefield tapped. Now, I should mention there is also the cost that if your opponent bounces the land, that you do lose the creature if they bounce. However, I think you got to keep in mind is most of the popular bounce spells in Standard are non-land permanent bounce spells. Yeah, there's some fringe cards that can bounce land creatures, like stuff like Bounce Off and stuff like that. But for the most part, this makes a very sticky creature that is really hard to remove, and even if your opponent does remove it, you still get your land back, which can trigger landfall triggers. Like, Earthbending is a ridiculously absurd mechanic in my personal opinion. So yeah, number 2, without a sweat, is the whole experience cycle for the Jumpstart set, but if I had to choose one card, it has to be Toph. Toph is just a ridiculously absurd card. There's going to be multiple experience decks that can have green in it that want to play Toph. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. Now, before we get to our number 1 card of the set for both the main set and the Jumpstart set, we got to talk about my honorary mention, which we have a rarity. We talked about the honorary mention before we talk about number 1. And for me, I think I'm going to go with, for the main set, one of my personal favorite cards of the set. It has to be Firelord Zuko. Mardu colors, red, white, and black for a legendary creature, human noble ally. It's a 2/4. Firebending X, where X is Firelord Zuko's power. And then whenever you cast a spell from exile, and whenever a permanent you control enters from exile, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Like I said, this is my favorite card of the set. It's just very easy to trigger this exile effect in general. I mean, there's a ton of ways. There's Impulse Draw, there's Warp, there is Flicker, there's even the Airbending mechanic, very flavorful that it works with the Airbending mechanic, to essentially be able to trigger Firelord Zuko's buff effect, and buffing your whole team is absolutely absurd. But also, I love this because it's a flavor win of design, because you kind of look at it at first level to be like, oh, the reason why it interacts with Exile is because Zuko was originally exiled. Okay, that's cute and such. But it's kind of cute because Zuko as a character is probably one of the better redemption arc storylines that we've seen in a TV series for a bit. And mostly it's just because he takes his experiences from exile and just essentially started off as essentially mostly looking like a one-note character, like the generic villain. Oh, I'm going to go after the Avatar, yada yada yada. But then kind of like through experiences and such, kind of like grows and just kind of redeems himself and such. It's a long redemption process, but able to redeem himself and experiences from exile and his adventures with multiple characters, including his uncle and such, to be able to realize that compassion is one of the best traits to have, and being able to help others and buff them up rather than trying to seek essentially power and oppression that the Fire Nation had from his dad and all that stuff. Compassion is one of the better qualities, and it's just great to see a design that actually caters to that. It is... And the best part is, since it's white in its mana colors, you can actually target it with Honor, so you can actually give Firelord Zuko Honor. Oh, and also, before I forget, yeah, Scalable Firebending, as stated before, is a very strong effect. So yeah, my personal favorite card, the minute I saw this card, I loved it. I realized that this set was going to be very good with the heart that they put into the set. Just, personal favorite card of the set. Now we got to talk about the honorary mention for the Jumpstart set, and we're going to keep this short and simple. The honorary mention for Jumpstart is...
That's rough, buddy.
1 and a white for an instant lesson. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on that creature instead if the creature left the battlefield under your control this turn, and you draw a card. Simply put, the reason why this is an honorary mention is because they did the thing. They quoted the meme. This is a popular meme within Avatar. It's cool that they did the thing. And as you can tell, as I stated before, with stuff like this and other cards in the set that we weren't even to talk about, you can tell that a lot of heart and flavor was put in both of these sets, and it's just great to see the love that was put into the set. Like, it is great to see how it caters to the fans, as well as just be generally just a fun design set in general. Now we get to the number 1 card of both the main set and Jumpstart, and the number 1 card, since you probably haven't seen this yet, you probably can guess what this is, but the number 1 card of the set, for the main set for Avatar The Last Airbender, is Badger Mole Cub. 1 and a green for a 2/2. When this creature enters, you Earthbend 1. And then whenever you tap a creature for mana, you add an additional green mana. I'm just going to be blunt. This card is bonkers. Earthbending, as stated before, is a very powerful mechanic. I already mentioned through top, kind of like the many ways how Earthbending is a powerful mechanic. But even then, this in multiples can lead to a significant mana acceleration. Like, I've seen people being able to ramp to 9 mana by turn 3 if they're able to get a turn where they have multiple Badgerable Cubs on the battlefield. Like, and note, we have mana accelerants like Llanowar Elves in Standard and other turn 1 mana dorks that can essentially help get mana accelerant with Badgerable Cub. Like, it is ridiculously absurd the amount of mana that this card is going to generate, and the fact that you can play multiple copies of it or clone it is absolutely absurd. Like, the amount of mana you're going to generate with this card is going to be absurd. Like, there's going to be times where you're going to get a turn free or a Boroid very easily against the Badgerable Cub. Like, it is that good. Or even, maybe like, just some ridiculously high late-game payoff spells that you can just essentially X-generation spells. Like, imagine, like, Doppelgain and making multiple Doppelgain copies of Badgerable Cub. Earthbend multiple times, and oh, by the way, you're going to get multiple mana accelerants with multiple copies of Badgerable Cub. It's just... This card is absurd. This is going to be one of the most popular standard cards, in my opinion, in the set. Yes, it's a card that can easily get removed, but the thing is, like I stated before, due to the Earthbending mechanic being very sticky, it does give you 2 bodies that are really tricky to remove. Like, yeah, people are going to remove the Badgerable Cub because they're worried about the mana accelerant, but you still get the Earthbending land card creature, which is going to be very powerful, especially with Standard, since we still have Wilds of Eldraine in Standard. As of this recording, there's a Restless Land cycle that's both in that set as well as in the Caverns of Ixalan set. These are creature lands that essentially can have either powerful attack triggers or triggers in general. And the thing is, those attack triggers are not on the activated ability of the creature land. So thus, you can actually Earthbend those lands and still get the attack triggers, which is very, very strong. We even have cards in the main set itself, like, okay, let's do the memes. And stuff like that, where Earthbending it can be ridiculously absurd. So yeah, I think this is going to be a multi-format staple card. There's a reason why this card is in the 30s. It'll probably stick in the 20 and 30s or higher. This card is absolutely absurd. One of the more powerful cards of the set. From the main set in general, it has to be Badgerable card. That's why it's my number 1 card of the set. Now, my number 1 card from the Jumpstart set, without a doubt, has to be the Cabbage Merchant. 2 and a green for a legendary creature human citizen. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you create a food token. But also whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, you sacrifice a food token. But it also has a very powerful activated ability that you can tap 2 untapped foods you control. Note they can be tokens as well as like food creatures if you have them. To then add 1 mana of any one color. And of course, the flavor text, my cabbages! Simply put, this is essentially what I like to call the Cabbage Remora, where it's just going to be very easy to generate food tokens and Commander with this card because there's a lot of non-creature spells that get cast in Commander. You know, your Soul Rains, Arcane Signets, your good mid-range value spells. So you can generate a lot of food tokens with this pretty quick, especially if you have token modifiers like Academy Manufactor. Like, imagine having an Academy Manufactor and Cabbage Merchant on the battlefield. Oh, the potential mana you can generate with that, as well as with the activated ability, is potentially pretty silly. Also, sacrificing a food by that combat damage trigger, while flavorful, it's not really that significant of a cost, honestly. It also can be a bonus in some deck designs, like, let's say, Corvode, sacrificing a food token. Sure. Or sacrificing a food token in Yigra. Oh, sure. I don't mind buffing my Yigra. Like, there's just a lot of decks, food decks in general, that will not mind sacrificing a food token, because sometimes that's just going to get them an additional synergy. And also, I just think this is going to be one of the more popular Commander cards of the set for value, as well as just the memes, because, hey, it's the Cabbage Merchant. It is one of the more popular memes from the Avatar set. It's just a very good card in general, and that's why the Cabbage Merchant is my number 1 card from the Jumpstart set. And, nevertheless, that is, without a doubt... Let me now change this to the other screen from Streamlabs. And that is, personally, my top 10 cards from both the main set as well as the Avatar Jumpstart set. Nevertheless, do you have any personal favorites from the set? If you have any, you can have them down in the comments down below. Nevertheless, hope you all enjoyed my personal top 10 cards, and I hope you have a lovely day. as they say, hip hip, hooray.